Welcome in to another episode of the Barnes on Bama podcast. I'm your host, Owen Barnes, and we do have a game to discuss. But before we get into that Georgia game, there are a few housekeeping things I do want to talk about on the podcast just before we get underway. Just as a little bit of a heads up, for this episode, we're going to talk about the Georgia game that happened on Saturday, as well as we're going to do a little bit of a midseason recap. We're 9 games through SEC conference play, so we're going to talk about how the season has gone up to this point. There is no midweek game this week, so we'll talk about what that looks like, and then we will kind of look ahead to what this stretch run is going to look like, because Alabama has 9 quad-wooden games on the horizon. Just as a heads up, this will be the only episode that's going to come out this week. This will be the main episode that's going to come out this week. I will probably record another episode maybe on Wednesday or so that will break down the Arkansas game. It's going to be a little bit shorter episode, just as a heads up, because I don't have a recap to go through. So it will be a little bit shorter episode, probably maybe 20 minutes or so. So just a heads up, that is what the plan is for the podcast. So like I said, wanted to use this episode to give a little bit of a midseason breakdown, and then we'll go from there. First things first, like I said, wanted to talk just a little bit of a few housekeeping things. For those of you that may have seen on Twitter or heard, I was able to go on Hunter Johnson's radio show, pregame radio show on Tide 100.9, talking about this Georgia game, talking about actually what we're going to talk about today with the midseason recap. So thank you for all the support on all these episodes. People like you and everybody watching and following along is part of the reason why I'm able to do some stuff like that. If anybody's ever interested on having me come on their show, channel, otherwise, just reach out. I'm more than happy to do those kinds of things, especially if time allows it. I am very passionate, obviously, about this team and about the things that Alabama basketball has to come. So if you are curious and having me on or whatever, please reach out. I'm more than happy to do those kinds of things. The other thing that I will mention is if you're not subscribed to the channel, please do so. The majority of people that actually watch these podcasts and listen to these podcasts are not subscribed to the channel. So if you are not currently subscribed to the channel, if you could do so, I would really appreciate it, because it does help the channel out and helps this grow. We're trying to get to 500 subscribers, but thank you so much for all the support otherwise. So we're going to get right in the show. We'll do the Georgia breakdown, and then we will get into how I feel this kind of season has gone up until this point, and then what I'm kind of looking for as we go into the back half of SEC conference play. So let's get right into it. Georgia game. Alabama played one of its more complete games this game. Not saying it was absolutely perfect. In Nate's post-game press conference, he said that he really felt like about 36 minutes were better. There was a little bit of a stretch kind of late in the second half, or late in the first half, that definitely felt like Alabama maybe was not playing to their potential. There was quite a lot of turnovers. But the thing that Alabama did, even though there were turnovers, is they didn't stop playing defense, right? Alabama did not let their defense wane, even though their offense was having a few issues. And we'll talk about those here in a minute, because I don't think the issues were the same as the issues you had in the Ole Miss game. Were they still turnovers? Yes. But at some points, it was, Mark Sears trying to make a pocket pass on the roll to Grant Nelson, a play that got you a lot of points in the Mississippi State game, right? It was people making the appropriate pass and then just good individual defensive effort by Georgia, right? Sometimes it's not a mistake by the offense. It's just better defense. And in a few cases, I think that's what happened. Not to say all of them were that, but I think a few of them definitely were that. But Alabama definitely is able to hold up its defensive effort. It really felt like in a few moments in this game, Alabama was going to take over and just dominate. In the first half, we're up by 12. It looks like we're going to completely dominate. Then Georgia cuts it close. Then Alabama's able to go on a little bit of a run to end the half and go up 11 at half. And then in the second half, it was really catalyzed by Mike White getting a tech. And, if you were in this arena or in the stadium, it definitely, for whatever reason, Mike was arguing there was one ball that was called a jump ball. The next one was called a foul. In his opinion, they were the exact same play. I don't think that they were, but, Mike White thought that they were. He gets into the ref. it gets a technical foul. Mark hits both free throws, and then it really had the crowd energized, and Alabama was able to build on that lead more and more and more, right? I think a lot of this had to do with Alabama just, like I said, playing sound defense and, playing together as a team. You also saw some guys hit shots that are not always hitting shots. And I think those are some of the guys that I want to talk about when you're talking about individual performances. We did have 5 guys go in double figures, so we're not going to be able to talk about everybody. I don't want this to be, 30 minutes just breaking down this game. But, the big people that I think absolutely need mentioned, first and foremost, Aiden Sherrill. Aiden Sherrill has to be mentioned because, when you're thinking about the team currently, if, we have 10 guys that have been healthy, that are generally healthy. Obviously, Darion Reed and LeBaron Philon did not play their best game. They're still coming back from injury. Nate says he wasn't even really expecting them to have great games because they haven't had the practice reps. But in terms of guys that, are still on scholarship and are still able to play, we have 10 guys. And number 10 of those guys in terms of minutes this season has been Aiden Sherrill. A lot of that has to do with the size he had coming in. Some of that has to do with foul trouble. But in this game, due to the fact that Georgia plays 2 bigs the majority of the game, Nate was like, hey, I thought I could get Aiden some minutes. Aiden plays 20 minutes in this game. And in those 20 minutes, he was super productive. He had a steal. He had a block. He had 7 rebounds. He had an assist. He ends up going 2 of 3 from 3-point line. He goes 4 of 4 from the free throw line. Aiden, in the first few minutes, Aiden has 10 points and really was, a spark off the bench. This really felt like the Aiden Sherrill that Nate Oates has raved about all offseason. And since he recruited him, Nate has often said that Aiden is the prototypical big that they're looking for, somebody that can pass, dribble, and shoot. And a lot of people were like, are you sure Aiden can shoot? Because on paper, he was only 4 of 24. Well, Nate was actually asked about that in the post-game press conference, and Nate said, hey, we chart everything from the minute a guy gets into our program on, and in live ball any 5-on-5 and live ball stuff, Aiden's a 40% shooter. He goes, so Nate looks at him as a 40% three-point shooter, and he wants him to shoot it like that, meaning he has the green light. If you're open, take the shot. So Aiden Sherrill, at this point, gets his feet set, gets into some shots. Obviously, the extra time he's able to play because he's not in foul trouble helps him get some extra minutes, which helps him get more into rhythm, which I'm sure helps his shot. But he has his best shooting night in Alabama uniform, a really, really good game. Overall, I thought Aiden's minutes were absolutely incredible. Another guy that, didn't play, honestly, a ton of minutes, but I thought was super productive in the minutes he played, as well as Jaren Stevenson. Jaren Stevenson hits 2 corner threes, goes perfect from the field, only has a couple of rebounds, but does have a block. I thought that Jaren overall played a pretty good game. A lot of people talk about Jaren as, oh my gosh, he can't be played. He can't be played because of how poor the shooting has been. Well, first off, he's been shooting a little better here recently, right? He's had quite a few games here in a row, I believe, that he's made shots. He missed his shots in the Mississippi State game, but since Texas A&M, he's made a 3 in every game except for Mississippi State and Kentucky. And he's only taken maximum of 3 shots in most of those games, right? So he's brought down his number of shots from, like the McNeese and Purdue games when he's shooting 5 threes a game and he wasn't making anything. So he's taking less shots, but he is making them, right? Much bigger thing. And I think that's a big, thing when you're looking at Jaren is his defense has been so good here recently that he needs to play because the defensive versatility that we have with Jaren has been very, very good. And then him getting the shots is just kind of icing on the cake. And then the last guy that I'm going to talk about, and like I said, I know I'm going to leave plenty of guys off, but it's Grant Nelson. I thought Grant Nelson just played an absolutely phenomenal game. When you look at Grant Nelson, he does better when he's matched up against a traditional 4, traditional 5, a back-to-the-basket guy because he has that physicality. I thought that the matchup against Asa was a pretty good matchup for him just because Asa being a freshman, Grant being a fifth-year guy. Grant's somebody that has that ability to use his talent as well as use his physicality that he's used to of playing all that time. And the thing is, Grant scores 16 points, 10 rebounds, has 5 blocks, has a couple of assists, right? It really felt like Grant was kind of everywhere. I thought the help side defense was really good. I thought that overall, just as a team, everybody, played to their potential, or not everybody played to their potential, but everybody played in a way that you thought they would, right? Now, does Alabama still have some things to clean up? Absolutely. Nate talked about the turnovers. You had 20 turnovers that ended up not biting you in this game, but Nate hopes that because you have the fifth-year seniors and you have all the guys that have played a lot of basketball, that they're going to be able to learn from a win the same that you can learn from a loss. So that is something, obviously, that they're going to try to clean up in this off week. Another thing that you also have to look at is, again, Darion Reed and LeBaron Fallon. Both guys coming off of injury. Both guys were a situation where they did not play particularly good games, but that's okay, right? That they're coming off of injury. You're just trying to get them as many reps as possible. And, Nate talked about they're going to have to try to work with Clark this week to see if they can try to get closer to healthy. And again, not having that midweek game should absolutely help. Because those guys can be sat out of practices for a little bit and it not be as big of an issue, right? They have time to get ready for that Arkansas game. That's the next game on the schedule. And then the last guy I actually want to talk about, and we've talked about him a lot this season, but in this game it wasn't really even a scoring situation, but it was just what he did in the minutes he played, was Mohamoud Diabate. We talk about Mo a lot as being a glue guy, as being a guy that's able to just do a lot for this basketball team. But no bigger way to explain that than this most recent game, right? This Georgia game, Mo only plays 11 and a half minutes. And he has a little bit of an ankle that kind of flares up or whatever during the game because he was a little hobbled. And Nate, because Alabama was up, Nate, said, hey, he probably would have played more. But we just kind of sat him. And again, when Aiden's playing as well as he is, and you have the depth, you're able to do that. And the thing that you have to say about that is Mohamoud Diabate is a plus 20 in plus minus in his 11 and a half minutes, and also gets 20 blue collar points. For reference, Grant Nelson, Nate said, was second in blue collar, and Grant had 19 and a half. Grant played 26 minutes. Mohamoud Diabate played 11 and a half, right? So that's when you look at, on the stat sheet, Grant had a statistically better game, right? He had 10 rebounds. He had 5 blocks. But you understand, like, how productive Mohamoud Diabate is in the minutes he plays. And it's just something that's, I don't want to say uncoachable, but it's something that's a huge deal for this basketball team because it's something that's inherently unique to Mohamoud Diabate, right? There was an article that was put out earlier this week where Mohamoud Diabate is averaging about 1 blue-collar point per minute, and in Herb Jones's SEC Player of the Year season, he only averaged like 0.75, right? So that just tells you a level that Mohamoud Diabate is playing at. And in this game, in the minutes that you saw him on the floor, it was huge, right? It felt like he had steals, just diving on the floor for balls, like everything, no matter what, it really felt like Mo was doing what it takes to win. And to a degree, kind of putting his body on the line, which kind of feels like why he may have been hobbled in that the second part of that game, why he didn't play as much. But that is something that is just huge coming down the stretch run. And he's the reason, if you listen to the radio show with Hunter, he's the person that I point to when I look at this team that surprises me the most, because I just did not expect us to have an offensive option in Mohamoud Diabate. When you look at him last season, he could not really finish around the rim. He was a poor free throw shooter, so even if he couldn't finish at the rim, he wasn't making the free throws. He was a pretty good rebounder, but he was just such a liability in some other parts that it really felt like Mo was going to be that 11th or 12th guy on this roster. And in reality, in some cases, Mo's number one off the bench. If Nate needs somebody that can rebound, right? Mo will be the first guy Nate calls for off the bench. And that's just not something I fully expected. We have an off-road package for him from an offensive standpoint. And when you have a guy that has the versatility on defense and in what he does as Mo, and can give you that offensive, option as well. He goes 3 of 4. He has 6 points in this game. Definitely not his best offensive game ever, but, he was definitely completely fine when he was in. Has an offensive rebound, has 6 total rebounds. This is a situation where Mo just requires you to play him, right? For anybody that listens to the Spaces, that's something Joe Corona talks about a lot, that Mo just requires you to play him because he does the things that winning basketball players do, right? And it's no bigger thing, right? Nate's clearly showing, that, hey, you just got to play him. And it's honestly similar in a sense to like LeBaron Philon, right? When we talked about him in the offseason, Nate talked about how they thought about redshirting him, and LeBaron was just playing so well, it's like, nah, you got to play him, right? That's exactly what Mo's doing. When he dominates a practice from an offensive standpoint, Nate and them get some plays together for the off-road package, right? When Mo leads the team in blue-collar points and leads the team in rebounding and such at the level that he does, he requires you to put him on the floor, right? And those things are just, they can be coached, but they're things that inherently are in a player and clearly are in Mohamed Diabate. So that's what I want to talk about for this Georgia game. Like I said, even though he played in limited minutes, but I do think he had an absolutely incredible game. I thought in general Alabama's defense was very good. Newell does end up making 16 points. He took 15 shots though, so you'll absolutely give up the 16 points if they got to take 15 shots to get there. Not super efficient basketball, but we knew this was not going to be a very good offensive team, right? So holding them to 69 points seems right on target. I predicted 70. This score was not that dissimilar from what I was expecting. Game worked about how I expected. During the moment, I thought we may have opened it up even a little more. But, overall, I think this game was exactly what Alabama needed to get on track going into the back half of conference play. So we will transition, and, as I talk about the back half of conference play, for those of you that are unaware, the SEC conference play, there are 16 teams, and there are 18 games. Alabama is fortunate that our midweek bye is actually after our first 9 games. So Alabama currently sits at 8-1 in conference, and we have 9 games remaining in conference. And the important thing about that is it allows your team, obviously, to get rest and recovery. We talked about that with Darion Reed, LeBaron Philon, even Mohamed Diabate, right? Everybody's going to have some kind of lingering thing going on. Some are going to be more major than others. That like a Darion and LeBaron where they potentially could keep somebody out of a game. Some are just going to be kind of a nagging thing that goes on throughout the season. But, any of those things are something that can happen. And when you're looking at this, obviously a midweek is huge for that. And then the other thing a midweek does is it allows you to clean up a lot of the things that have been bothering you, right? Alabama even saw this when they played LSU last week. LSU had the midweek off, and they went from a really poor rebounding team, and honestly, LSU played pretty well against us. Now, some of it was Alabama playing poorly, but LSU, to their credit, did a good job at some things that they had not been great at over the course of the season. So that is something else that you're going to expect to see is the coaches with an ability to, place a little bit more emphasis on whatever the problem has been. And, Nate talked about, obviously, turnovers is the big thing he wants to key in on because you have those extra days where you can work to fix an issue instead of having to prepare for your next opponent. And then you can get into the prep for the next opponent under the normal cycle since your next game is on Saturday. So, this rest and recovery as well as being able to fix something that's been an issue, I think is going to be huge for this team, especially, again, we have 9 quad 1 games upcoming, and especially after Arkansas's big win in Rupp Arena on Saturday, none of them look like gimmies. If you had asked me coming into before Saturday, I would have said Arkansas, should be a win for Alabama, but Arkansas's big win against Kentucky, have they found something? We will see. But definitely a solid win for Arkansas. So, you don't want to overlook them at all either. So let's look at, obviously let's talk through what all the games are upcoming. Or actually, let's start with what has happened so far, and then we will go into what's upcoming. So far, Alabama sits at 19-3, 8-1 in conference. We talked when we ended non-conference play that if you had offered me 11-2, would I have taken it? The answer would have been yes. The loss on the road in Mackey Arena against Purdue doesn't hurt you even a little bit. If you would ask me going into it, my assumption would have either been a loss against North Carolina or Houston, probably not the loss against Oregon, although Oregon, has played well, so that, doesn't end up being a bad loss at all. But, I would have taken 11-2 given the schedule that we had. I'm not upset with how we finished non-conference play. Again, we move into conference play. I was not happy with the Ole Miss loss, right? Especially with Ole Miss then losing a bunch of games thereafter. And Alabama, clearly just did not give Ole Miss the credit that they deserved. And Alabama did not play well at home. You never like to lose a game at home. So that's really the thing that's the most frustrating about that game. But my expectation was not that we would go 3-0 in Rupp Arena, in College Station, and in Starkville, right? I did not think we would be able to go 3-0 on the road in all three of those environments, and we did. So those afford you the ability to lose that game at Ole Miss, right? So, again, if you offered me 8-1 saying, hey, Alabama's going to go 8-1 going into the bye or the midweek bye, would you take it? Absolutely. 8-1 going into the midweek bye, given who we had to go on the road to, what that schedule looked like, I would have absolutely taken it. And so maybe it didn't get there how I expected, but the end result is something that I would have taken. So that tells you that at this point, 19-3, you offer me that going into the season, I'm absolutely taking it. You tell me we're 19-3, 8-1 in conference, I will take that in a heartbeat, right? Honestly, if Auburn would not be having their historic season, my assumption would be you'd probably be tied for first place in the league, right? Auburn's doing absolutely incredible, so they're at 9-0 or 8-0 in conference. But my expectation coming into the season would be that 8-1 at this midpoint in the season would be in first place. But we're just outside of first place, sitting in second currently, with in striking distance to be able to make a run for a league title. So when we look at the games upcoming, I would kind of break them apart as you have these first two games, and these two games are crucially important. And it's because both games are against teams that are semi-seen as lesser than. Arkansas currently sits at 2-6 in conference. Texas currently sits at 4-5 in conference. And so this is a situation where neither team is performing to the level that you think that they're capable of, right? Neither team is an elite offensive team. Neither team has been incredible. But winning on the road in the SEC is not easy, right? I don't care if it's a good team. I don't care if it's a bad team. I don't care what you think of a team. Any team is capable of beating anyone on the road or at home. And so the fact that both of these games are at home, especially right before that Auburn game, is something that you're going to have to keep in mind, right? I do think that Alabama will be prepared to play Arkansas. The game that scares me a little more is actually that Texas game. Because of how well Alabama has played on the road, I think I'm a little more confident in that Texas game, just because of how the guys have had that intensity on the road this season. If that game was at home before Auburn, it would really, really scare me. Like I said, I do think it being on the road, funny enough, gives me slightly more confidence. It is on a Tuesday, though, so that one bothers me a little, just because if that Arkansas game turns into a physicality game, which, Arkansas is not the most physical team, but they can play that way at times. But if that game turns into a physicality thing, having the quick turnaround, both games being on the road, is not something that's the best criteria for success. So those two are two that you definitely have to circle. And then is really the stretch run of all stretch runs. You have home against Auburn. Obviously going to be a very, very tough game. I would expect that as long as Alabama can beat Arkansas, College Game Day will be in Tuscaloosa for that Auburn game. It's going to be a top 3 matchup. Um, Missouri on the road, if you've seen what Missouri just did against Mississippi State, that's going to be a very, very tough game. One that Alabama will have to play to its potential to win. Home against Kentucky, obviously they're going to want revenge for us beating them in Rupp. Do I think that Alabama can win that game? Sure. But you cannot take a Mark Pope offense lightly. He definitely has the ability to coach the offense, and if Alabama does not play to their potential on defense, they could absolutely beat you. Mississippi State, obviously Mississippi State always plays you tough. They are a very good, hard-fought team, very good coach team. So I do expect that to be a great game. And then the last three games are three that if you can go 2-1 in this stretch, you'd be thrilled. Tennessee, Florida, and Auburn, with Tennessee and Auburn both being on the road. That gauntlet is just gonna be brutal, right? I do think that Alabama has the ability to win any of those games if they play to their potential. But as I said, if you go 2-1 in that stretch, you will absolutely take it. That stretch of three games is as tough as three games that anybody will have in the entire country all season. And to end the season with potentially the conference regular season on the line, there will be no bigger games because there is a very real chance that on March the 8th in Auburn Arena, the SEC regular season title is on the line. So, just the way the schedule shakes out, the way that Alabama's back half goes in, it's going to be a very, very tough slate going through. But I do think that Alabama has the ability to win. If you were to ask me what my prediction is kind of for the back half, I think if you can go, I think realistically like a 6-3, maybe dropping games. Realistically, dropping like the Missouri game and then going, dropping Tennessee and Auburn on the road. Lose those three away games, win the Arkansas, Texas, and the rest of the home games. I think it's a very realistic outlook. Anything better than 14-4, I think you absolutely take, right? If you finish 15-3, 16-2 with this schedule, you absolutely love it. I think that if Alabama can finish better than 14-4, you can almost guarantee that we're going to be a top 2 seed in the conference or in the NCAA tournament. I know currently Lenardi has us as the second 1 seed behind Auburn. I know Lenardi's maybe not considered the best bracket guy ever, but to give you an idea where people are putting us currently, Alabama's looked at as somewhere around a top 1 seed, maybe the second 1 seed overall. Last thing I want to go through is kind of the Ken Palm and what I want to see out of some individual players. I'm not going to do it for every single player, but I do think there are a few that either have underperformed or have been injured, and what I want to see from them coming into the back half before we get ready for the end of conference play, conference tournament, and the NCAA tournament. So when you look at stats, when a lot of people look at how Alabama is doing, like from a shooting perspective, a lot of people talk about Alabama's a poor 3-point shooting team. And the number they're going to see is the season percentage is 33.6, which is actually better than it was and has risen some. But that's actually my point, right? From a season, they're 33.6. But if you change this to conference-only games, Alabama's actually shooting just under 37%. 37% from 3 is completely acceptable, especially with how good we've been from 2 all season. The quantity we shoot, that's going to be over a 1 point per possession. Alabama has the defense to be able to hold somebody under a 1 point per possession. And, when you combine that defense, the free throw shooting that we've had this season for the most part, and just overall, I think that Alabama shooting that well from 3, especially as you've had guys like Chris Youngblood take some steps forward. You have Jaron Stevenson knocking down some shots. Mark Sears has got his percentage back up. Aiden keeps shooting as well as he has. You've had a lot of increase in 3-point shooting, and I think that's obviously helped Alabama through this most recent run, and if they can keep it going in this back half of the season, that's going to be huge. The other thing that you want to look at is I think that Alabama has done a good job getting to the line. Obviously, when you look, we're second in the SEC in free throw attempts, or free throw rate, I guess. and we've done a great job running people off the three-point line, right? So Nate Oates, when you're looking from a conference-only standpoint, they have done a very good job running teams off the three-point line, not letting people get assists. Getting our percentages better than they were in the entire season. And honestly, that's similar to what you saw last season, right? We talked about how poor Alabama's defense was heading into the NCAA tournament, but Nate had said all season, if I can just get the defense to be better, our offense is good enough to make a run. And he was able to get the defense to get to that, top 40 level. And that top 40 level was enough that the offense could propel you to the run that you had in March, and you end up making a Final Four, right? So when Nate, looks at things like this, he knows from an analytics perspective what it takes to make a run, right? Like, hey, for example, the turnovers. He knows if you keep the turnovers like this, you will eventually go up against a team when you're shooting poorly and you have the turnovers and they're not shooting poorly and they're going to blow you out, right? You're going to keep giving them the ball, they're going to keep shooting well, and that's going to be game. And he knows that, and so that's why he has that as a key point to fix going into this break. The other thing that we want to talk about, as I said, is some of the players. And, I think that a lot was made out of Mark Sears. You've seen most recently the last couple of games have been some of the better games he's had in Crimson, especially from an intensity standpoint. Maybe not from an overall standpoint, because some people are going to point to the turnovers. And I do, understand that there were turnovers, but again, I don't think they were the same type of turnovers against Ole Miss. I think he's trying to get his teammates involved. I think, some of these are just outstanding individual efforts by the opposing team. Now, granted, you can't just keep having that happen over and over again, but I think it's not the end of the world. We can clean that up. So not at all concerned about Mark Sears. Want him to keep playing how he's playing. With LeBaron Fallon and Darion Reed, it's really just a health thing for them. I think that LeBaron was playing really, really well before he got injured. I think that when he has the confidence and the ability to play like that, especially with Aiden and Chris Youngblood playing, it's going to take some pressure off of LeBaron, where, after Latrell Wrightsell got hurt, you really only have 4 guards instead of 5. And it really felt like LeBaron was kind of pushing himself to a degree and was putting a little bit too much emphasis on himself if he was playing poorly. And I think that overall, having Chris Youngblood step up to the level he stepped up is massive. From an Aiden Holloway, just keep playing how you're playing. The dude still only has 1 game in conference play that he has under 10 points, that Kentucky game, which it was completely fine to not have. And because of how well the rest of the team played. So, keep playing how you're playing, being absolutely incredible. Chris Youngblood, for anybody that thought his three-point shooting was a problem because of how he started the season, understand he had an ankle injury and clearly was just not prepared. Was trying to get back into the swing of things. He looks much more comfortable. He's getting used to the minutes. He's getting used to the role he plays. His trigger on a 3 is absolutely lightning fast. You saw in the Mississippi State game how well he can make shots. He made some more shots in this Georgia game. He is turning into the three-point sniper we expected him to be coming into this season. So thrilled with what I'm seeing out of Chris. Cliff Amore, I think, is getting more used to how we want to use him in this offense and is also becoming more of a menace on the rebounding. You saw him have 11 rebounds in this game, including 4 offensive. I thought that Cliff in general, as he gets better rebounding the basketball, and that's something that Nate has challenged him to do, the ceiling of this team just gets better and better because I think that Cliff obviously has that ability, but just was not playing physical enough and to that ability just because of how Alabama plays as compared to Rutgers. And I think that that's what you're looking for out of Cliff. Just continue the rebounding. We're going to keep trying to find him on the lobs. We're going to keep trying to get him the easy passes inside, the big-to-big throws, lobs. I think that in general, Cliff just has to stay with the rebounding. And those are the big ones, right? Those are the big ones that I think a specific person, I think Mo D, obviously just keep doing what you're doing. Aiden Sherrill, if he can kind of build off of the minutes that he had in this Georgia game, it would help because you will face some teams, whether it be in the rest of SEC play with some physicality or in the NCAA tournament, you're going to face a team that plays multiple bigs, or you're going to have a game where somebody's calling just a ton of fouls and we have guys get in foul trouble. And having another option like Aiden Sherrill that's able to go in, make some threes, rebound, defend without fouling, be a big body in the paint, those things just, again, that's the reason why we talked about the talent of this roster coming into the offseason or into this season because of how many options they had. This is exactly what we were talking about, right? When somebody gets in foul trouble, when somebody gets hurt, you have another option, and that's exactly what you have with Aiden. So if he can kind of build off of this game, I'm not expecting 12 points out of him every game, but if he can be productive in his minutes, think about the Mo D thing we talked about. If he can be productive in the minutes he plays, again, that just all raises the total skill talent of this team and the ceiling of this team. So that's what I would have to say as we go into the rest of the regular season. As I said, I will record an episode. There will also be a thread coming out on Saturday. So if you are interested in those threads, subscribe to me over on or follow me over on Twitter, O&D Barnes. That is where I put out those threads. As I said, I will record an episode. Probably we'll try to record maybe Wednesday to go out on Thursday for this Arkansas game. Like I said, will be a little bit shorter episode, so just be on the lookout for that. It will break down that game and any other potential news that may have happened in the midweek that I have missed. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I do appreciate all the support to the channel, and I will catch you in the next episode. Peace.